Hey, it's TDA and welcome back to Astro Colony. During the holidays, I wanted something a little bit more simple to play, although I'm not entirely sure this qualifies as more simple, but anyway, I decided to play some Astro Colony, taking a little bit of a break from Satisfactory at least for a little while. And don't worry, it won't be too long, but I wanted something else to do, and I figured why not show you what a more endgame version of this game looks like, because I haven't really gotten around to that so far. Now, when it comes to the technology tree, there's actually a lot of stuff we haven't done yet. It goes a long way to the right. But for now, there's a couple of things that we haven't done yet that we definitely want to unlock. So that includes the oxygen barrier, which removes the need to manually reload your oxygen. It's not really a huge quality of life thing, but hey, it's nice. There's also the cosmic harpoon, which we can use to connect to a land area, and in order to get there we're going to need engines, which are over here. So we can actually move our little colony around, which is going to be very useful. And another couple of cool things coming up are the robots. Transport robots will allow us to actually have little robots moving around. It's one of those things which I'm always really confused about, that Satisfactory doesn't have those. Of course, you have those drones at the very end of the game, but yeah, you get these very early on. So it's gonna be fun to play around with that. And of course, after that, there is a lot more other things coming, like hangars, rovers, colonists, and stuff like that. But let's get going first. Now, as you can see, we're kind of running out of space on our tiny little colony. We do have 3 automated asteroid catchers doing their thing over there. And that means that we have a steady inflow of pretty much all the basic resources that we can craft. It's not going to be at a huge speed, but it's one of those things, just like in many other automation games, as long as you have a steady trickle coming in, as long as you're building something, you're still producing, and that means that overall you should not have to handcraft much or anything at all, really, because to be honest, you don't need that many materials in this game, so it adds up really fast. Now, in order to get both our oxygen as well as our actual base moving, we're going to need a lot of liquids. So we already unlocked the oxygen generator, and we're going to need some water along with that oxygen. Which means we're going to have to build an icebreaker, which converts the ice from the asteroids into water. Then we're going to need water transportation in order to actually transport that water, and you can actually store water in water cells, which are basically just giant aquariums that you can fill with water. To actually fuel your engines, you are going to need hydrogen, which we are going to be producing in a hydro generator. And of course, hydrogen is going to need some water. And once we have all of that, then the logical next step is to actually get the oxygen barrier up and running, which will use those oxygen tanks that we can then produce in our oxygen generator, in order to basically generate a dome over whatever area we want, in order for us to allow us to actually breathe there and not have to restore our oxygen manually. And then last but not least, we have unlocked the engines, which we can use to then start moving our base. We also unlock quartz, but that's not going to be irrelevant for now. Now, you might be wondering, where are we going to produce those oxygen tanks? And yes, that is the oxygen generator, which was the first thing that we unlocked. You'll actually need to push this button over here in order to see what other recipes there are. And if you unlock the recipe over here, or at least you enable it, it will automatically start producing, which also means that you can disable production in certain buildings. For example, I've actually done that over here in this manufacturer over here, which normally would use these items to produce wires. But we have a giant stockpile of these already, so I figured, well, why not just turn this off, and then we can collect these from the actual building if we want, and then we're not basically wasting our plates on something that we don't really have any need for at the moment. Now, in order to actually expand our base, I expanded the platform first, and I chose to do so with these nice little black platforms. Now, actually, there's no foundations under those. I actually thought that there were supposed to be foundations under these. It probably looks better, although, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure why you would bother if you don't have to. I had an impression earlier on in the beta that would be added at some point, but it doesn't seem to have made it to the live game. So, just floors it is. Now there's a lot of different types of floors that you can actually pick. There's all different types of colors that you unlock pretty much from the get-go. They all cost the same, so you can go completely nuts with these if you want. For now, just keep it simple and keep it black. I also noticed, by the way, that the actual wiring just goes straight through the floor. These wirings were already in place, and I'm not entirely sure if this is supposed to be happening like this or not. They're kind of clipping through, but to be honest, I think it looks kind of cool, so I'm just leaving it as is. So something like this should do the tricks. And no, these two buildings are actually not the same. I was actually confused a little bit myself, because the hydrogen as well as the, let's see if I can click them, there we go, oxygen and hydrogen generators look almost the same. They have a very similar layout as well, but they are definitely two different buildings, which, to be honest, the only way you can tell is that this has a kind of a red glow, this is a kind of a blue glow. As well as, of course, once you put them down, you can see the outputs, because this one has an input and this one has an output in the back. But yeah, and of course the roof looks slightly different, etc, etc. But all in all, these look very, very similar. So the idea is this: we are going to have to transport the ice cubes up here. We're going to convert them into water. Then we will bring the water into both this building as well as this building, and then we're going to make some hydrogen over here and some oxygen over here. Now we also have this output over here where we can use that hydrogen tanks to go somewhere, which, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure that's needed. At least it wasn't in the beta, but let's find out. That actually means that we need a pusher over here, so we have all the ice going in this direction, which in turn means that we can remove this one over here. Let me see, how do I do that again? I always struggle with the controls. Not like that, not like that. There we go. And then we push delete, and then we should have the remaining ice going over. Now, of course, we can bring this ice. We actually don't need the storage unit anymore, so we can also just delete that. There we go. Practice makes perfect. And then if we have any ice coming from these, we actually have an ice asteroid over here being pushed in. All the ice should be going in here, but we can of course speed it up manual a little bit by actually putting all the ice we have in store into it directly. Now we have the water generating already active, so now we need to make sure that this actually has somewhere to go. Now, I'm not entirely sure why this isn't working. I think I struggled with this in the beta as well, but as you can see, obviously the icebreaker is working, so it is producing water, but the water, even though I have these beautiful pipes attached to these buildings, doesn't seem to be actually reaching the oxygen and hydrogen generators. So I'll have to fiddle around a little bit with it in order to make it work. Great news, everyone, the water is flowing again, and apparently the trick is to add a reservoir, one of those aquariums, next to, or at least close to, the icebreaker, so it has somewhere to actually store all that water, and then from the storage you can actually transport it into the buildings. Now, I'm not entirely sure why it works that way, but hey, if it works, don't argue with it. So, that means we now have some oxygen coming in, we have some hydrogen coming in. We do need actual carbon ore in order to make this hydrogen, so that's going to be a little bit annoying, because right now I need all the carbon I can get in order to power my base, which also means we probably want to increase our production sooner rather than later. But before we do that, let's see if this actually works. So let's place down one of these oxygen barriers somewhere in the middle-ish. Should work just fine. And we're going to need to build some power. And let's see if I can actually do this straight through the base. You can actually see there's one missing there, so we can't actually place power into a foundation. But we can probably solve that by just making a tiny little hole in our base like this. And then connecting that. Let's go. There we go. And then dropping that down. There's probably an easier way to do this than I'm doing right now, but hey, it works. And whoa, look at that. You can actually see the oxygen barrier very nicely. It's not exactly centered to the middle, but we'll fix that once we start expanding our base a little bit further. But that means that as soon as we get in there, you can see the oxygen on the bottom left increasing now, so that means we will have infinite oxygen as long as this is producing some of these tanks. But apparently we don't actually need to feed the tank into the barrier, so that is very convenient. So we can just leave them in here and we'll have oxygen whenever we reach our barrier. Yeah, so let's see what's next. Right, almost forgot, robots. In order to make these robots, we're going to need to make a robot assembler, and then we should be pretty much good to go. So let's do that. Thanks to the removal of the oxygen storage, as well as the facility creating it that we had in the middle over here, we now have a little bit of space. So I'm thinking of just placing the robots assembler in the middle for now. It's definitely not going to stay there, but expanding the platform is really expensive, and I just want to have a couple of robots up and running. Now let's see, in order to make these robots we're going to need copper plates and hydrogen tanks, so we should have a little bit of both. Let's see, we have plenty of those for sure, and then we're going to need some hydrogen tanks. So let's see, we have plenty of those up and running already over here, so that means we can simply put those in, and now we should be able to craft a couple of those. Assuming, of course, that we power this thing, so let me get on that. So, power done, and as you can see, the building is glowing slightly red at the moment, and the reason for that is that the robotics facility starts off disabled, and you'll see why once I turn it on, because it cranks out these robots really fast, and of course there's a limit to how much robots you want. Well, maybe not necessarily a limit to how much you want, but definitely a limit to how much you can fit on your platform, because as you can see, these things are not tiny. So now we actually have those robots, it's time to put them to use. And I have to say, it took me a while to actually figure out how to use these robots the first time around, so let me show you. If you click on any building, you normally have this overview. However, if you increase the thing over here with the inventory, other than showing your own inventory, you now have transport bot requests down the bottom over here. Now, once again, not entirely intuitive. I'm not entirely sure why it's in this area altogether. I would expect it somewhere here, but anyway, and the way you use that is you can add a requested resource. So in this case we have no recipe set up over here, but that doesn't really matter in terms of the resource, because what we can do is add a requested resource. It's good to set a limit to how much resources you want. So let's say, for example, we want 15 iron bars over here. Now as soon as we add that, and we have a maximum of 5 robots set to that, look at that, we have these little robotic spiders gathering that for us. And as soon as we reach the limit of those 15 bars, right now they're automatically being transported out of this specific facility because it doesn't actually use these. But you can get the point. You can set this to any building. You can even, like for example with the miner over here, you can set it to receive the ores manually, and that's going to be amazing in terms of improving the layout, because as you noticed by now, we have all the resources coming in on this side, then we have to split them all over the place. We want some of them to go to one building, some of them to go to somewhere else. We want storage in between there, etc. So it gets really confusing really fast. And let me disable this because this is actually not doing anything. So if you go to the request, you can just click it, you can disable the request, and then they should stop transporting. I said they should stop transporting. Yes, right? No, maybe? I don't know. Why are you still transporting? Not entirely sure about that. Probably because it was still cute. Anyway, oh, now you see they stopped. So we can actually completely overhaul our entire base now because we have these robots. Now, of course, you do still want to use belts here and there, because doing every single transport by a robot is not going to be convenient at all. But what we can do is kind of have like industrial zones where we're producing base resources, and then having those be supplied in a little bit in a more efficient manner than we're doing now with belts all over the place. But that's going to be in the next episode. I really hope you enjoyed this one, and of course in the next episode what we're also going to do, a little bit of a spoiler, we're going to see if we can get some of these areas over here, these planetoids, attached to our base, because that's the second way you can actually expand your base, by, well, basically building it into a small planet. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and I hope to catch you in the next one.